Welcome to this joint hearing of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities with the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection. Today, we will examine interagency cyber cooperation and the roles, responsibilities, and authorities of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. Holding this joint hearing has been a priority for this subcommittee for the past few months, and we are pleased that it has come together today. This is a timely opportunity to hear about recent interagency coordination efforts and the status of related FY 2019 NDAA provisions. This is a critically important topic that will shape our oversight going forward as we consider the long-term policy frameworks needed for the United States cyber enterprise. Our committee, and ETC in particular, has performed significant oversight of the cyber organization, operations, and mission force development within DoD. With this joint hearing, we can now take a broader focus on the cyber organization and capabilities within the entire United States government. Cyber threats posed by both state and non-state adversaries continue to grow and evolve at a rapid pace. These threats are not just to our military weapons and systems, but also to our nation's critical infrastructures. Attacks against the electric grid, the financial sector, or our healthcare system could have profound impacts on our daily way of life and economic security. As we have seen in recent years, cyber attacks, such as WannaCry ransomware, can have significant adverse economic impacts and bring the private sector and government services to a standstill. And since the average response time to detect a cyber attack is measured in months, not minutes or hours, we must improve our abilities to detect and respond to malicious cyber activity. This year, 3 important cyber strategies were released by the White House, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Homeland Security. These strategies all recognize the importance of a whole-of-government approach to addressing the challenges posed by securing our nation in cyberspace. They will be an important step in building a cohesive U.S. cyber enterprise. And while this hearing today isn't solely about election security, it affords us the timely opportunity to hear about the significant interagency efforts recently aimed at ensuring the security of our 2018 midterm elections. Protecting the elections required a broad approach led by the Department of Homeland Security that included contributions from the Department of Defense and many other partners. Our subcommittee, in collaboration with the Homeland Security Committee, have been active in addressing the issue of improving cooperation between the two departments. In this year's fiscal year 19 National Defense Authorization Act, we established a pilot program that allows the DoD to provide technical cybersecurity personnel to the Department of Homeland Security in order to enhance security and resiliency of critical infrastructure. I look forward to hearing the status of this pilot program at this hearing. Also in this year's NDAA, we created a National Security Artificial Intelligence Commission that will be important in identifying the impact AI will have in the cyber domain. As our adversaries continue to improve at increasing speeds, we must similarly grow our abilities to defend against these threats. I believe that we will only be successful if the U.S. can leverage the capabilities and authorities of all its departments and agencies in a united approach. We must reduce wasted resources on overlapping and duplicative efforts in government to make sure that we are using our cyber defense resources sensibly. Both agencies here today have made great strides in building their cyber capabilities over the last few years. To build upon that progress, I firmly believe we need to continue to work to build interagency partnerships to ensure that whole-of-government approach to countering this growing cyber threat. Let me welcome our witnesses here today, Ms. Jeanette Manfra, Assistant Secretary for the Office of Cybersecurity and Communications at the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Ken Rapuano, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security and Principal Cyber Advisor at the DoD, and Lieutenant General Bradford Schwedo, Director of Command Control, Communications and Computers, Cyber, and Chief Information Officer at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We look forward to your testimony. And before I turn to my friend and ranking member Jim Langevin of Rhode Island for his opening remarks, I want to take a moment to thank him for his hard work and dedication over the past 2 years of the 115th Congress. It really has been a highlight of my time in Congress working with you, Jim, and I look forward to partnering with you in the future in a collaborative and bipartisan approach. I now want to recognize my friend Jim Langevin.
Thank you, Chairman Stefanik, and I want to begin by thanking you and Chairman Radcliffe for convening this joint hearing on such an important topic. And likewise, I want to say what a pleasure it's been working with you over this the last 2 years as you chaired the subcommittee, and it has been collaborative and bipartisan, and I too look forward to continuing our working relationship as well. So thank you for that also. So the challenges in cyberspace affect all aspects of our national and homeland security, and I'm glad that these two subcommittees, both of which on which I sit, are collaborating to better understand the cooperation between the agencies that we oversee. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today as well, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. But before I do go any further, I also must congratulate Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Thompson of the Homeland Security Committee for their work shepherding the NPPD reorganization bill through the House last night. It's been a bit of a slog, as it often is with our friends on the other side of the Capitol, but after 3 years, I'm proud they will soon be officially opening the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at Department of Homeland Security. The legislation headed by the legislation headed to President Trump for signature reaffirms Congress's intent that the Department of Homeland Security take the lead role in protecting civilian government and critical infrastructure, something I look forward to hearing more about from our witnesses today. In particular, I'd like to congratulate you, Assistant Secretary Manfra, and I hope that you'll pass along my congratulations to Undersecretary Krebs as well. The new agency will be well served, I know, by your leadership as well as the inaugural executive team. So, and also, let me say what a pleasure it was to have you up in Rhode Island recently, and I appreciate your contributions there that you made to our Cyber Advisory Committee that I had put together. But beyond the implications of this existing new development, we're here this afternoon to discuss collaboration between two agencies with important but distinct cybersecurity roles. Now, again, I was privileged enough to have to host Assistant Secretary Manfra back in my district late last month to hear about some of this collaboration with respect to election security. Our elections are obviously the cornerstone of our democracy, and it is essential that they be protected from any interference, foreign or domestic. As we saw in 2016, the threat is real, and it demands a whole-of-government response. Recognizing this, DHS and DoD worked together in the weeks leading up to the election to remove any legal or operational obstacles that would prevent timely defense support of civil authorities in the case of a cyber incident targeting our elections that exceeded DHS's asset response capabilities. I was also pleased that DoD was able to work with National Guard personnel activated under state active duty status, including some of our excellent network defenders right in Rhode Island, in order to share sensitive intelligence on Election Day. The efforts of both those departments paid off, and due to their work and the diligence of local election officials, last week's voting went off without any a major cybersecurity incident, but we cannot let the success blind us to the tremendous challenges that remain ahead. As highlighted in the recent cyber strategies that have come out of DHS, DoD, and the White House, our adversaries continue to look for ways to gain an advantage by exploiting our vulnerabilities in cyberspace. And while Congress has been abundantly clear about DHS's primacy in defending civilian networks in the United States, coordination, collaboration, and information sharing with the DoD will be critical to the defense of the homeland. So I hope to hear from our witnesses today how these collaborations are succeeding, and frankly, where more work needs to be done. I want to better understand how, in a time of crisis, DoD will be able to prioritize the requests coming from DHS while achieving its mission of protect the DoD, the DIB, and other defense-critical infrastructure, and maintain capability and capacity for conducting Title X cyber operations. So, understanding that DHS can and must have the capability to take on more of the domestic mission without relying exclusively on DoD for support, I hope that witnesses will address what capability building is and should be going on to better empower the new CISA. I also hope the witnesses will talk about how they're ensuring collaboration works its way down to the operational level so that Homeland Security equities are fully considered throughout the entire decision-making chain. Recent policy developments from the administration, from National Security Policy Memorandum 13 to the recently signed Joint Memorandum, will help frame the U.S. government's collective response to cyber threats, and I trust the administration will be fully transparent with our committees in providing these documents and candid assessments of their implementation. Finally, I look forward to hearing a status update on the report required in Section 1653 of the FY19 NDAA about cyber civil support teams and the feasibility of using their unique authorities to better defend the nation. So cybersecurity is a team sport. Only by working together can we reduce our risk and ensure a bright future where the Internet remains open, reliable, interoperable, and secure. So with that, again, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I want to welcome Chairman John Radcliffe of Texas from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection Subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee to today's hearing, and now I yield to him for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stefanik. I'm excited to have the opportunity to hold this hearing with you. These joint events always provide some unique insights and perspectives that would be hard to explore under a single committee purview. We're here today to discuss something that is vital to our national security. Cybersecurity affects every single American every single day. That's because cybersecurity is national security. So it's imperative that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense work hand in glove to protect our nation's systems and to provide assistance to our critical infrastructure partners. That assistance comes in many forms, and that is part of the reason why we're here today, to explore the roles and responsibilities of the two departments and to better understand how they can effectively and efficiently work together to keep our nation safe from malicious cyber actors. Whether we're talking about the Chinese stealing sensitive information on our Navy submarines, or the Iranians attempting to target defense contracting systems, nation-state actors remain poised to use any cyber vulnerabilities or gaps in our defense to get a competitive advantage to use against us later. That is why I am grateful to have representatives from the Department of Defense here today. I look forward to hearing how they, as the sector-specific agency, are partnering with the defense industrial base to ensure that our nation's capacity to wage war remains unmatched. I'm also pleased to have a representative from the Department of Homeland Security here to lay out the multitude of roles that DHS has in this space, and I am confident that Assistant Secretary Manfra will do her usual superb job of illustrating the department's broad array of responsibilities and authorities. Those include overseeing all 16 critical infrastructure sectors and partnering with industry to share information and build capacity, and protecting federal networks from the daily inundation of cyber attacks. The department has statutory authority to carry out all of these responsibilities, and it is imperative that DHS continues to take the lead in this regard. A civilian-led system embodies the foundation that this democracy was built on. Despite their respective individual roles, the most effective way to keep our country's cyber ecosystem safe is through DoD and DHS cooperation. We can't have a stovepiping of efforts, we can't have a fractured set of agendas, and we cannot have a disjointed front line in defending against our cyber adversaries and threats. We need to ensure cooperative approaches to cybersecurity, approaches like Section 1650 of the NDAA, which allows for DoD personnel to assist Homeland Security with cybersecurity-related efforts. This was an effective tool that was used to help bolster DHS's preparedness in the lead-up to the elections just last week. There are other approaches like Project Pathfinder, which seeks to keep our financial sector safe by streamlining information sharing and using it to defend forward. I have faith that both departments can and will work through any growing pains that may be encountered, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on both the past successes that we've had at keeping this nation safe, but more importantly, on how we can continue that success going into the future. Finally, in what is my last hearing as the chairman of this subcommittee, I want to thank all of the CIP members, both Republican and Democratic, for their excellent work this Congress. The 115th Congress has been defined by bipartisan success when it comes to legislation and oversight on the issue of cybersecurity, and our committee has paved that path. I hope that we can continue to carry this momentum and energy forward into the 116th Congress and work in a bipartisan manner to ensure the integrity of our national security, because cybersecurity is national security. Again, I thank our witnesses and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Louisiana, the ranking member, Cedric Richmond, actually, he's here. I was just going to put your opening statement in for the record. And when you get up here, I'll recognize you for any opening remarks.
Our Chairwoman, Stefanik, and Chairman Ratcliffe for holding today's joint hearing to assess interagency coordination of cybersecurity activities at the Department of Homeland Security and at the Department of Defense. Last night, after years of debate and negotiation, Congress sent H.R. 3359, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act, to the President's desk. This bipartisan legislation confirms, once again, that Congress intends for DHS to be the primary federal civilian interface with the private sector on cybersecurity. I look forward to working with DHS to help the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency mature into an operational component and develop the capabilities needed to meet the challenges ahead, from securing election infrastructure to protecting the grid. The Department of Defense will be an integral partner as DHS carries out its mission to help secure civilian networks. I understand that DoD and DHS recently signed an agreement clarifying how they will coordinate certain cyber activities. Although I have not seen that agreement, I am hopeful that it will provide clarity for the department's roles and responsibilities. I look forward to reviewing the agreement and ask that it be submitted to our committee as soon as possible. Moving forward, the success of DoD and DHS's collaboration rests on whether the following three things happen. 1, DoD and DHS must implement the agreement of understanding at both the policy and operational levels. 2, DoD and DHS must communicate and adhere to their respective roles and responsibilities as they engage with agencies across the federal government and with the private sector. And 3, the administration must request and Congress must provide the funding and the resources necessary for DoD and DHS to carry out their missions. To my first point, too often I hear testimony from principals about how well their agencies are coordinating, only to learn from folks in the field that it isn't the case. To me, the problem seems to be that as federal agencies work to delineate roles and responsibilities on cybersecurity, they reach an agreement on a policy level without involving the operational folks. That invites frustration, confusion, and at times mission creep. Accordingly, I will be interested in learning how DoD and DHS plan to socialize their new agreement on cyber roles and responsibilities throughout their organizations, from policy operations and solicit buy-in. On the second point, it is important that the respective cyber missions of DoD and DHS are communicated and clearly understood throughout the federal government and among critical infrastructure owners and operators. Toward that end, I will once again note my strong concern that the White House has eliminated the cybersecurity coordinator. A White House cybersecurity coordinator would be in the best position to ensure the full capabilities from across the federal government are brought to bear to protect against cyber threats without sowing confusion about who should be doing what. Finally, we have to provide DoD and DHS with the resources it takes to do their jobs. As everyone here will acknowledge, the cyber threats we're facing are evolving, and we have called on DHS to help secure the federal government, state and local governments, and critical infrastructure from breaches by state and non-state actors. But DoD's cyber funding outpaces DHS's cyber funding by about 8-to-1. If we expect DHS to be DoD's civilian equivalent for cybersecurity, we need to fund it that way. I thank the witnesses for being here, and I look forward to hearing their testimony. With that, Madam Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Richmond. Your timing was perfect for your opening statement. Immediately following the conclusion of this open hearing, the members will transition to Rayburn 2212 for a closed classified briefing from our witnesses. Without objection, the witnesses' prepared statements will be made a part of the record. I ask that the witnesses please try to keep your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. And Ms. Manfra, we will begin with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairwoman Stefanik, Ranking Member Richmond, Ranking Member Langevin, and members of the committee, thank you for today's opportunity to testify regarding the Department of Homeland Security's ongoing and collaborative efforts to strengthen the cybersecurity of our nation's critical infrastructure. This is a core Homeland Security mission. But first, I would like to thank you for your leadership on establishing the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Department. The National Protection and Programs Directorate will now have a name which accurately reflects the reality of what we do. We secure cyberspace, the institutions, systems, and services that help businesses thrive and government of all levels operate. Last night, the House passed the legislation by unanimous consent, and the bill is now headed to the President's desk. This accomplishment could not have been achieved without the strong leadership of our partners here in the House of Representatives, and we know this demonstrates your own commitment to ensuring our national security. For the last 10 years, I have worked to advance the Department's cybersecurity and critical infrastructure mission. Prior to joining DHS, I was an Army officer, so I believe I have a unique perspective on how we can better strengthen the DoD and DHS partnership, and I'm personally invested in making this happen. I'm proud of the progress that we've made to date and looking forward to talking more about our progress ahead. Cybersecurity threats remain one of the most significant strategic risks for the United States, threatening our national security, economic prosperity, and public health and safety. Rarely is a cyber event sector-specific. Our adversaries target systems that are cross-sector, and the growing interdependencies across sectors demand an integrated approach. Establishing CISA highlights the central role we play across the federal government and our responsibility to all critical infrastructure in making manifest this integrated approach. As we have learned, information in federal operations must not be siloed. This is one of the key lessons learned from 9/11. To combat a threat that is transnational and operates in the seams between agencies and the public and private divide, a whole-of-nation approach is required. We see these same lessons applied, amplified by the speed of technological change to cyberspace. At NPPD, and soon as CISA, our vision is to fully realize this national effort, challenging old organizational and institutional divides across the federal government and between the public and private sectors that impede our ability to provide for a collective defense in cyberspace. Collective defense, the idea that the risks we face in a dense, interconnected, technological environment are shared, is the only model and way forward. Threats and risks do not conform to our divisions, neither should we. We believe it is our responsibility to make this a reality. We will forge a national understanding of threat and risk and coordinate across the federal government and private sector to detect and respond to cyber threats wherever they occur. We serve as an information and operations integrator focused on delivering organization-specific and cross-sector risk management support to enhance the resiliency of our nation's critical infrastructure. Our National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, or the NCIC, provides a broad range of capabilities to assist private sector entities across all sectors of critical infrastructure, including energy, finance, communications, emergency services, and healthcare. It's best to think of the NCIC as the point of fusion for cybersecurity threat detection, response, and coordination for both the public and the private sectors. We bring together the intelligence community, law enforcement, sector-specific agencies, international partners, the private sector, and the Department of Defense to carry out this mission. The challenge of effectively coordinating Homeland Security and Homeland Defense missions is not new, but it is amplified and complicated by the global, borderless, interconnected nature of cyberspace, where strategic threats can manifest in the homeland without advanced warning. DHS and DoD recently finalized agreement which reflects the commitment of both departments in collaborating to improve the protection and defense of the homeland from strategic cyber threats. This agreement clarifies roles and responsibilities between our organizations to enhance our government's readiness to respond to cyber threats and establish coordinated lines of efforts to secure, protect, and defend the homeland. In order to achieve these objectives, our departments are adopting a threat-informed, risk-based approach that ensures the resilient delivery of national critical functions and services. We will jointly prioritize a set of high-priority national critical functions and non-DoD-owned mission-critical infrastructure that is most critical to the military's ability to fight and win wars and project power. Based on this prioritization, we will forge a common understanding of strategic cyber threats that can enable private sector network defenders, critical infrastructure owners and operators, and government actors to proactively secure their networks and operations. And finally, our departments are coordinating to inform and mutually support our respective planning and operational activities. With our knowledge of the domestic risk landscape and our work with the private sector, we will inform DoD's Defend Forward efforts to preempt, defeat, and deter malicious cyber activity outside the U.S. that is targeting our critical infrastructure. And DoD's Defend Forward operation will inform and guide our efforts at DHS to anticipate adversary action, understand potential risks to critical infrastructure, and empower our private sector stakeholders with the information they need to secure their enterprise. Our vision is to continue to be the central axle for cybersecurity across the federal government, ensuring both federal and private sector partners have a full and complete understanding of the threats we face and are prepared to defend against them. I look forward to further outlining our efforts to safeguard and secure cyberspace. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Rapuano.
Chairwoman Stefanik, Chairman Ratcliffe, Ranking Members Langevin and Richmond, and members of the committees, thank you for your opportunity to testify on interagency cyber cooperation between the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security. Last week's midterm elections serve as a timely inflection point to review the close collaboration between our two departments. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the sea change in our partnership and thank you for your broad and continued support for the department's cyber missions. Before reviewing the department's strategic posture for cyberspace, I'd like to offer a few observations on the threat environment. As the National Defense Strategy and the 2018 DoD Cyber Strategy make clear, the Homeland is no longer a sanctuary from cyber threats. The United States' strategic competitors are conducting cyber-enabled campaigns to erode U.S. military advantages, threaten our infrastructure, and reduce our economic prosperity. In particular, we're engaged in a long-term competition with China and Russia. These states have expanded the competition to include persistent campaigns in and through cyberspace, with activities that individually fall below the threshold of armed conflict, but collectively pose a long-term strategic risk to the nation, as well as to our allies and partners. Nested within the national security and national defense strategies, the 2018 DoD Cyber Strategy prioritizes the challenge of great power competition and recognizes that the department must adapt a proactive posture to compete with and counter determined and rapidly maturing adversaries. It makes clear that DoD's focus on cyberspace, like in other domains, is to defend forward, that is, to prevent or mitigate threats before they reach American soil. This focus complements the DHS cybersecurity strategy's emphasis on domestic preparedness and risk management. Together, the DoD and DHS strategies form a natural, mutually supporting approach to defense in depth. With these new strategies in place, DoD and DHS have worked together to establish a framework to drive domestic preparedness and critical infrastructure protection efforts. Secretary Mattis and Secretary Nielsen recently signed a joint memorandum that frames how DHS and DoD will secure and defend the homeland from cyber threats. This is a major step forward in fostering closer cooperation and marks a sea change in the level of collaboration between our departments. Implementation of the joint memo is already underway. Yesterday, I joined my DHS and Joint Staff colleagues to sign the joint DoD-DHS Cyber Protection and Defense Steering Group Charter. Established at the direction of Secretaries Mattis and Nielsen, this steering group will apply senior leadership energy to enhance the U.S. government's readiness against cyber threats. This fall, Department of Defense and DHS cooperated closely to ensure that all appropriate federal government tools and resources were available to protect and defend the 2018 midterm elections from foreign interference. DoD provided standing approval for DoD personnel to support DHS cyber incident response activities in the event a significant cyber incident impacted elections infrastructure. The National Guard also played an important role in election support. Governors from several states used National Guard personnel in state status to support election cybersecurity in accordance with state law and policy. Beyond elections, DoD is focused on how to improve collaboration with DHS and the critical infrastructure sectors Through a series of Pathfinder initiatives, we are enabling private sector entities to defend their networks by sharing relevant threat information. In turn, these Pathfinders will enable the Department of Defense to leverage private sector threat information to inform DoD cyberspace operations. We are also strengthening the defense industrial base sector partnership to improve the security and resilience of the defense industrial base critical infrastructure. This approach aligns with the National Defense Strategy guidance to enhance joint force lethality and reform departmental procedures. DoD is coordinating with DHS's National Policy and Programs Division to establish a joint plan for future cyber incident response. By identifying roles, responsibilities, and coordination mechanisms, we are establishing a baseline for efficient and effective interagency operations. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight the National Guard's contribution to DoD and the nation. We fully recognize the National Guard's two complementary roles as an integral part of the total force and as a state capability. Section 1653 of the FY19 NDAA, which requires an assessment of the feasibility and advisability of establishing cyber civil support teams, provides an opportunity to review and refine the role of the National Guard. My team will lead this review. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. As you can see, the Department has undertaken extensive work with DHS to improve defense of the Homeland and national critical infrastructure, but there is much left to do. I look forward to working with Congress as we address the challenges facing the Homeland, and I welcome your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Schwedo.
Chairwoman Stefanik, Chairman Ratcliffe, ranking members Langevin and Richmond, and members of the committee, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security, cyber collaboration and information sharing. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Congress for its quick action in approving the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019, providing new authorities that allow the Joint Force to conduct cyberspace operations to disrupt, defeat, and deter malicious cyber activities. Thank you for your broad and continued support. Since the elevation of United States Cyber Command from a sub-unified command to a combatant command, cooperation on cyber issues between DoD and DHS have been streamlined through Cyber Command, and it has prospered. Close cooperation between the departments has exponentially added value in areas such as intelligence sharing, cyberspace operations, and cyber policy development. As Mr. Rapuano indicated, midterm elections provided a real-world platform to showcase interdepartmental collaboration in cyberspace. The cyberspace capabilities of the Department of Defense and DHS has increased through partnership and working together to secure the nation's election systems. The 2018 National Defense Strategy, 2018 DoD Cyber Strategy, and the draft 2018 National Military Strategy all reflect what DoD senior leaders refer to as a changing nature and character of war. Russian and China military thinkers have closely studied the United States and devised strategies to achieve their objectives short of armed conflict. They are doing this with actions below the threshold of armed conflict, leveraging propaganda, diplomacy, economic pressures, and threats to coerce nations. Our joint forces need the best intelligence, information technology, and training, and they need it quickly. The joint force is committed to act in concert with our interagency partners to share threat intelligence, to enhance the whole of government defenses, and our collective ability to respond to malicious cyberspace activities. Sharing intelligence, indications, and warning are one of 6 lines of effort specified in the joint memorandum between DoD and DHS, referenced by ASD Rapuano earlier. Together, the joint memorandum and charter provide guidelines to vector the departments in sharing information, reducing the timeline on actionable intelligence, and paving the way for proactive collaboration in the defense of our nation. This requirement to share intelligence and information is bidirectional, and it is not confined to the sectors owned and operated by DoD and DHS. To that end, we are engaged to set pathfinder efforts with DHS and with sector-specific agencies charged with the security of critical infrastructure. The National Defense Strategy establishes the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dunford, as the global integrator, with the understanding that the evolved nature and character of war make it unlikely that the impacts of a conflict will be confined to a single geographic area of operation. The U.S. homeland can now be impacted directly by events that 20 years ago would only generate indirect or collateral effects. In the cyber domain, this shift requires the joint force to take on at least two additional roles. One is the global integration in cyber, and the other is coordination of cyberspace activities. The Joint Staff is taking on the global integration role to synchronize collaborative efforts to ensure impacts from one theater of operations does not affect the other and are intentional and supportive rather than collateral. During the closed-door session, I will provide operational details regarding ongoing efforts that illustrate the close cooperation among the departments with regard to election security and critical infrastructure pathfinders. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. Our relationships with federal, state, local, industry, and international partners is critical to everything the Department is doing in the cyber domain. We appreciate your continued strong support in providing the authorities that allow us to strengthen these partnerships and build strong programs to protect and defend our nation. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you to each of the witnesses for your testimony. My first question has to do with many of the themes we've heard already, is this whole of government approach. Obviously, we need to ensure that we are not siloing information, but at the same time, we also need to ensure that we're not seeing mission creep. Because when it comes to our oversight and our jurisdiction, we want to make sure that each agency has the resources available for each department. But I would like to know what efforts are being taken to ensure that each department focuses specifically their efforts on their lanes of responsibility to prevent mission creep. Ms. Manfra, we'll start with you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. I think what we have decided to do is take real-world scenarios. And so we talked a little bit about the Pathfinder initiatives, also with the elections, but working through specific real-world areas where we do need to share information, and having both the lawyers and the operators working side by side, working with the operators in terms of what information would be useful for you to have access in order to do your job, and then working with the lawyers to ensure that we're not going outside the bounds of what's appropriate from an authority perspective. And defer to my DoD colleagues, we feel very comfortable that this is the right approach. And as we learn from each one of these sort of initiatives, whether it's with the financial sector or the energy sector or elections, we're learning lessons that can be applied more broadly.
So we are extremely conscious of what our focus and priority is in terms of defending the nation against extant threats. The transformation in terms of the way the Department of Defense looks at the homeland with regard to vulnerability to cyber, particularly with regard to critical infrastructure, is that significant threat to national critical infrastructure is a national security concern. It remains a DHS mission. And the role that we play and that we very clearly defined in all of our engagements, as well as the Memorandum of Understanding with DHS, is that we provide civil support to civil authorities in those cases, in those areas where the needs exceed DHS capability and their unique skills and capabilities that the department offers.
Lieutenant General Schwedo, did you want to add?
Sure. You know, just one point that Ranking Member Richmond brought up. Often there's a frustration because we go through exercises to try and figure out some of the details of these relationships. These elections gave us a real-world platform where we started working out a lot of these things, and we actually had a meeting yesterday where we sat down, and there isn't always concurrence on a point of view. The good news is we're taking these opportunities in a real-world scenario as opposed to some theoretical war game, and I feel we're gaining a lot of ground. And actually there was a discussion about letting our staffs come together and make out the equivalent of a 3-ring binder and figure out so we can move very fast with, we think it's scenario B, bang, so we can get them faster in their lane, the support they need, and the mission set associated with it. So once again, we're taking advantage of the opportunity right now.
And my last question in the minute and a half I have left, we've heard in previous hearings and briefings that there's no common cyber operating picture that is shared between DoD, DHS, and FBI. What efforts are being taken to address this shortfall?
I can start, ma'am. I think whether there are tools that are available to have a common operational picture in terms of incidents that we are working to share, but it does get back to the earlier point is we have to be very precise in terms of what information agencies have the authority to view. And so we're working very closely, kind of going back to that, what do the operators need to do their mission, and then how do we create the environment where we can share the information appropriately, so ensuring names are anonymized and those types of things. And so I think we've made more progress in this area than we have in the previous decade in just the last few months, very much focused on the elections. But that's how we're approaching it in terms of we have great technology that's available to us and that allows us to share information, that allows us to look for patterns, those types of things. We want to leverage that, but we have to do it in the appropriate legal frameworks. And so we're getting all those lawyers and operators together to work through specific instances to make sure we can get to that common view.
Thank you. My time is about to expire. Mr. Langevin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Manfra, one of the key challenges we face with interagency cooperation is prioritization, given limited resources and agencies with different mission sets. So how is the stand-up of the new National Risk Management Center helping to inform efforts to understand the vulnerabilities of critical functions, and how are you ensuring that these lessons are diffused throughout the interagency, particularly to the Department of Defense?
So the work of the National Risk Management Center is filling a key gap that we identified, which was looking at the systems and the functions across the country. So it's taking a more functional approach instead of thinking about specific assets or organizations, but it's looking at defining what we're calling national critical functions as one of its key efforts. And that effort, working with industry, will then be able to inform how our department, how other departments and other sector-specific agencies such as DoD are participating in this. And so we're defining it from a mission and industry from a business perspective. And then once we have these national critical functions identified, which we will have by the end of the year, then we're going to assess the risk to those. And DHS and DoD be working this together, and as well as other agencies that have a role in there. And then that starts to be able to trickle down into so what we can focus on, are we prioritizing all of our resources towards protecting and preparing ourselves for responding to the disruption or the denial of some of those key functions and services? So that's really the kind of the core of the National Risk Management Center, and it's how it's going to help inform myself, but also the other agencies.
Okay, and to both you and to Mr. Rapuano, I'm pleased, obviously, that Secretaries Mattis and Nielsen have recently signed a joint memorandum. We've discussed that, touched on that a bit today, and I certainly look forward to reviewing it. How are your departments working to ensure that collaboration goes beyond just the principal level and happens operationally as well?
From my perspective at DHS, the core of the collaboration is actually happening at the operational level. Our Deputy Director for Operations within the NCIC has been our lead for collaborating with her counterparts across DoD, and then we're identifying other collaboration points. So whether that's on the operations side or the planning elements, and then the steering group will be that mechanism by which we oversee that collaboration and ensure that we're actually making tangible progress on these outcomes. But the bulk of what we're doing is actually happening at the operational level.
Okay.
I would echo that. Our staffs work very closely in terms of, in my organization, as well as the joint staff. The real working level work is at U.S. Cyber Command, working with Secretary Manfra's folks on the operational piece of the equation. We also have a direct interest at the Department of Defense as the sector lead for the defense industrial base, and we are collaborating more and more on that based on the threats that are manifesting associated with, again, particularly Russia and China, as well as defense critical assets for which we have dependencies on commercial critical infrastructure. So that's another area of focus and area of collaboration with DHS.
So I may come back to a couple of questions, but I wanted to get this clarified too. Mr. Rapuano, what's the status of the report required in the FY19 NDAA on cyber civil support teams?
So we are currently working that, the response to that. I can get you the details in terms of when specifically we'll be getting that to you.
Okay, that's something that we would need to follow up on, and I just wanted to get a status report, and we look forward to seeing the final version. But let me go back. Mr. Rapuano, can you describe your approach to bringing DHS in on Pathfinder conversations with the financial sector and DOE? And Ms. Manfra, if we have time, how can we better ensure DHS's unique perspective as the federal lead for cyber defense is represented in interagency policy decision-making, especially when the department's relative newness, the department's relative newness means that it has not traditionally been included?
I would just start by saying, with regard to the Pathfinder on the financial sector, it wasn't a question of bringing DHS in. We were engaged from the very beginning with DHS on that, as well as the Department of the Treasury. One of the interesting facets of the financial sector is they have a very sophisticated, significant investments in cyber protections. And the outlook and approach there was looking at what best practices may they have developed because of the time and attention they've played that we could be applying to other critical infrastructure sectors. And the energy focus for both of us is a high priority, because energy is considered to be really one of the fundamental foundational elements of critical infrastructure for which many of the others depend on. So again, that's been something we've been engaging with DHS on from the beginning.
Thank you.
I can answer it very briefly. We are absolutely included in all the relevant conversations related to cyber operations, whether those are at the NSC or with DoD or other agencies. While we are new, we have a secretary who is very knowledgeable in cyber, and myself and my boss, Undersecretary Krebs, we're in every one of those conversations where we need to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Ms. Manfra, I want to start with you. It's been publicly reported that 50 DoD personnel were reassigned to the NCIC in the lead up to last week's midterm elections. Can you go into a little more detail into the nature of their mission within DHS during that time? I'm curious what operational role DoD personnel played, if any, that wasn't just situational awareness.
We had 11 personnel that came over, integrated. We do have liaison officers that have been long established with DoD that come from Cybercom. They've been integrated. Part of the conversation that we had in setting up, pre-negotiating, if you will, the request for assistance, should we need it, if we needed search support on Election Day or after, was that it would be helpful to have some DoD personnel that would be fulfilling that request have some familiarity with our organization. So they came over for a couple of days just to become a little bit more familiar. They're still serving in that liaison role, but it was about 11 people that did come over. Okay.
I want to follow up a little bit on the discussion about Pathfinder as it relates to the financial sector. As you know, the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 offered liability protections to private organizations for sharing cyber threat information with DHS. And that protection, of course, was intended to incentivize the private sector companies to share information with the federal government. But I'm not sure. I'm a little concerned that the financial sector organizations are sharing information directly with DoD, and I'm wondering if that's the case, are those organizations still offered liability protections?
To be clear, sir, they're sharing it with DHS. We're partnering with DoD in as I mentioned, working through the legal constructs to ensure that DoD can have access to the information as well. So it's sort of through the DHS framework and the construct that we're bringing DoD into being a part of. I would defer to DoD on the liability protections.
You want to expand on that?
I'm not tracking the liability protections, but as Secretary Manfra notes, we really work with and through DHS in terms of the interface with the private sector. We bring the expertise and unique capabilities that the department has, but we're very conscious of not crossing over lines in terms of sensitive or proprietary information. So we really use DHS as a gatekeeper or filter, so to speak.
Okay, so let me follow up on that with you, Mr. Rapuano, and you, General Schwedo, in terms of, what we're hearing from DHS stakeholders is that there's a general agreement about rules of the road at the high level, but maybe not at the command level. So I'm thinking of responses to domestic cyber activity like the ransomware attack on the city of Atlanta, or NSA's knowledge about hackers that attack Sony Pictures. I guess I want to be real clear. Are DoD elements looping in DHS to ensure civilian cybersecurity equities are considered before or after the fact?
So I will tell you, sir, as we're going through Pathfinders, et cetera, we are very cognizant of all the laws, and that's why you'll hear Mr. Rapuano say we go through DHS. As it stands right now, we follow to the letter of the law, and that's much of the discussion that you hear between the two elements as we go forward. We get requests for support from DHS, and then we turn it over to lawyers on both sides of the street to make sure that we're following the piece. But any belief that somebody is going VFR direct to the Department of Defense is not what's happening. We work through DHS on all of our support.
Just to add to that, DHS has the domestic protection mission. DoD is supporting DHS in the form of defense support to civil authorities through DHS's authorities. So again, we're working very closely with DHS. DHS comes to us if they've got needs that are beyond what they can within their own capability sets employ. But if we were to employ them, it would be through DHS authorities.
Okay, I very much appreciate that clarification. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Richmond.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Schwedo, you answered pretty much my first question about collaboration between organizations. So let me focus for a moment on the funding aspect. With respect to securing civilian cyber space, the role of civilian agencies in the military is well defined. Congress has decided that outside of national emergencies, DHS and not the armed services or the intelligence community should lead these efforts. So the question is about funding. Right now, DoD has an $8 billion budget for cyber, given DHS has basically $1 billion for critical infrastructure. Considering that 85% of critical infrastructure is privately owned, how do we balance that, and at what level would you say that a mission like that should be funded? And that's for the entire panel.
So sir, the first piece is, comparing the two budgets. First of all, Cyber Command is responsible for not only defensive actions here, but they also have a combatant command responsibility to ensure cyber warfare going on the other pieces. So that's one difference. The other piece is, I think if you look at the responsibility, and we're still talking about how to fund some of these things. Mr. Rapuano will talk about it, but we've talked everything from, and this is part of the Pathfinder, which has been a wonderful experience, is talking about the equivalent of a Cyber Stafford Act and other things, because we're very cognizant of how funding in a bunch of different directions could get pretty bad. The last part is there is going to be a responsibility for a lot of these companies and other people that we've been talking about earlier to have their portion of cyber defense. For them to just put their hands up in the air and say we're not going to fund it anymore, I think would also be a bill that we could not afford. But I'll turn this over to Mr. Rapuano.
I would just add that when you look at the DoD's budget, and the figure $8 billion is often used, the great majority of that funding does not go to U.S. Cyber Command. The great majority of that funding goes to development of weapon systems with cyber resilience and cybersecurity capabilities to the services. Cyber Command, I believe, is under $500 million a year in terms of its funding, closer to $300 million, I believe. We can check that fact, but it's a very small percentage of the overall $8 billion, which is going into weapon systems and the Defense Information System and the CIO.
From a DHS perspective, sir, we are a fairly new agency, and we have been growing steadily. I would say that absolutely support the President's budget, appreciate the assistance through the omnibus in additional resources to assist us with the elections and helping with additional capabilities to civilian agencies. But to help understand the scope, there are 99 civilian agencies that I'm responsible for assisting with cybersecurity. There are just in one sector alone, there are hundreds of thousands of companies that operate our water and wastewater treatment plants. So there is a massive scope and scale in what we're trying to secure. We are very grateful to Congress for the authorities that we've been given, and we look forward to working with you to ensure that we have the capability and the capacity to deliver.
Well, this is one of those golden moments, and Lieutenant General, you kind of mentioned the Stafford Act. I am, survivor of Katrina and Rita. We don't hold the Stafford Act out to be the great example of anything, and I really wish this committee had, at least Homeland had jurisdiction over the Stafford Act so we can improve it. But Assistant Secretary Manfra, here's your opportunity to say, I think we have enough resources to protect the privately owned critical infrastructure. I think we don't. And what we don't want to happen, especially since my district is the first largest petrochemical district in the United States, what we don't want is Monday morning quarterback to say we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the support, we didn't get X, Y, and Z done. So I guess my question is, as we head into budgeting and all the other stuff, do you think you have the resources to accomplish the mission that is so critical to everyone up here? So that's basically the question.
Sir, what I would say is that, as is demonstrated with the additional resources that you gave us for elections, we can do more with more.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Bacon.
Thank you all three for being here. I'm grateful for your expertise and your hard work. My first question is to General Schwedo, who I've worked with for quite a while. He's got a lot of experience in cyber warfare. And I'd just like you to explain to our country and our citizens why this topic is so important, that we don't have seams or overlapping. And if you could put it in the context of what would you anticipate on day one of a major cyber attack, say from Russia or China? It's obvious to be a military directed attack at us, but will those targets be only towards military, or would you anticipate it being a wide array of targets in our country? If you could just elaborate what you would anticipate.
So I'll just give an overview. We can definitely talk in detail in a closed session. But what we are seeing is from both Russia and China, they prefer to stay below the level of the threshold of armed conflict. And you'll find that we're seeing more and more when we see Ukraine and other countries, when you see power and other things start going out. My concern is sometimes the citizenry is the soft underbelly. And I think that's kind of where you're going with the question is and that's why this is so important, is we need to ensure that we shore up that. And that is part of the discussion we're having today, as opposed to just throwing up our hands and saying we fight foreign wars. We're not going to launch in and start taking over things in the United States. We're very cognizant to what DHS has to do, and that's why it's so important to make sure that we get it right when we go through these pathfinders, to make sure we get it right, that we get them the information and the support they need as it goes forward. But I do believe the portion of your question is spot on. I do believe that it's going to be wide-ranging, and I think if they get their way, just like the sons and daughters of Sun Tzu, they would prefer to not fight force on force. They would prefer to get their way below the level of threshold of armed conflict, because the world has seen what happens when they go toe-to-toe with us, and that's not the preferred COA they'd like to go with.
So just to re-summarize, it would be a military attack from their own cyber capabilities, but very likely the focus will be on areas covered by DHS. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important that we don't have these seams or overlapping things. It's very important that we have it right. Because we know day one will not be a December 7th type attack. We'll be going after our energy grid, our financial sector, all those things that would create havoc. And so it requires significant cooperation between DOD and DHS to get this right. And my next question would be to Ms. Manfra. We passed a bill earlier this year that gave DHS responsibility over industrial control systems, but it's sitting in the Senate right now. How important it is to you and DHS that we get this out of the Senate and signed by the President?
Well, first of all, sir, I want to thank you all for recognizing the uniqueness of industrial control systems. These are the systems that really underpin most of our critical infrastructure. And DHS has had a unique role to play in industrial control systems, having some of the most recognized globally experts in our ICS cert. So very much appreciate that acknowledgement that we need to have this leadership role, and looking forward to continuing to work with the Senate and others to codify that.
We need to give a nudge over there, I think. Get that signed and or voted on and sent over to the President. My final question is this, and it gets back to really the focus of your all's time here today. Do any of you see where we have overlapping responsibilities, where it's creating problems? Do you need more delineation through legislation? Do you have any recommendations for us in that area? So do we have areas of overlap, or do we have areas of seams that we need to do better on? Thank you.
Sir, I don't see any areas of overlap. We have definitely identified that there's a potential for seams, and so we're working to address those, going back to starting at these national critical functions. And I know DOD is thinking about what is critical to their capability as well. And so working together to ensure that we're bringing the full force of both of our authorities. I do believe that they're very complementary. I don't believe that they're duplicative or overlapping in any way. And so we're just going to continue to ensure that we can operationalize those authorities so that we can both do our missions.
Mr. Rapuano, anything to add?
So, as Secretary Manfra notes, we're in the process right now of looking at what our critical national functions are. And typically, because we looked at the Homeland as a sanctuary traditionally over time, and with the threat of cyber in particular, the Homeland is no longer that sanctuary. We're looking at all of our dependencies as the Department of Defense and our ability to project power, where they are in critical infrastructure, and how we can better ensure their resilience. So in the event of a conflict, we'll be able to leverage them.
Thank you. I yield.
Ms. Demings, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Demings, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. This question is really for the entire panel, and I do appreciate the information that you shared with us thus far in this very critical area. And my question goes back to collaboration, cooperation. A question was asked earlier about resources, and I think we do better when we have the ability to share information and better work together. So my question is, how are DHS and DOD working together on supply chain risks, especially in light of the growing overlap between the defense industrial base and traditionally civilian sectors of U.S. critical infrastructure?
I can start, ma'am. This is actually one of our key areas of focus, given the exact point that you just made, that the many civilian agencies use many of the same companies that are in the defense industrial base and that DoD uses. There's a series of actions, some of which we can talk about in the closed hearing as well, that we are ensuring that we're coordinating so that we are using our authorities to drive better risk practices, both with the agencies that I have the directive authority under, with civilian FISMA agencies, as well as on the DoD side, but that we're also sharing information and that we're coordinating and ensuring that if we're aware of a compromise of one of a vendor for one agency, that both of our agencies are aware of that and we can take coordinated action.
Thank you. Secretary Rapuano.
I thank you for the question. It is a very significant focus and concern in terms of the supply chain and the dependency that we have on it for our weapon systems and communications capabilities. We are focused in the interagency with DHS, but other key agencies, Commerce and others, in terms of identifying where the vulnerabilities are and how do we identify how we can restructure and better protect critical supply elements necessary for the economy and the military.
And General Suedo?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So this clearly falls under the information sharing piece, and we are aggressively looking for these backdoors, et cetera. And as soon as we find one, we go back to the relationship with DHS or dependent on who is the recipient of this backdoor to ensure that we start sharing the information, because we understand that there's multiple actors in this realm, and we're trying to get after it.
How would you say the White House is coordinating these efforts, and how are roles and responsibilities currently aligned?
The National Security Council is working through much of this. As Mr. Rapuano noted, there's OMB, the Office of Management Budget. When you're thinking about federal procurement policy, legal teams need to get together from Department of Justice, et cetera. So this is a whole of government effort that is being managed by the White House. Then there are specific things that DHS and DOD are committing to do with each other because of our unique authorities and oversight over the networks that we have the oversight on.
Secretary Rapuano, would you like to add anything to your original answer?
I would just concur with Secretary Manfra that this is a whole of government focus because there are a number of different agencies with authorities and responsibilities and expertise, and it has been working very closely, at least from my observation.
I would just end with it has to be a whole of government approach. We've got to make sure that we track it down in all aspects. So absolutely, that's where it has to come from, and it has to go down to the lowest levels. Thanks.
And you feel like you're on target with reaching your mission and your goals in that area?
So, ma'am, the supply chain challenge is incredibly hard, and this is one of those ones we cannot fall off the target. We've got to stay focused on this the entire time, and I unfortunately hate to tell you we'll never, quote, get there. We're going to have to continually, because there's always going to be bad guys that are going to be shaking windows and shaking back doors trying to get into our systems, weapon systems, any supply chain piece, commercial off the shelf. They're going to do anything that they can. Sons and daughters of Sun Tzu, they'll go like water to the least offended place and try to place their back door there.
Thank you all, and Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Demings. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And ma'am, when you mention the word procurement in this particular field, I imagine you could spend weeks in committee meetings on that, and we'll be looking forward to your input on how we best handle procurement. I want to mention one other thing before I get to my specific question. We've got people effectively doing the same job from different agencies. And my question gets back to compensation and employee benefits and managing a workforce that comes through different agencies. If you've got tremendous discrepancies in pay, that can lead to problems in the management of your team. Is that an issue that you have been able to address, or is that something that you're going to need legislative help with?
So we actually have received legislative help on this in a bill passed a few years ago.
Okay.
We are working to create what we call the cyber talent management system. We have been able to leverage some existing authorities, direct hire authority, retention incentives to reward those who have achieved certain certifications in difficult to retain positions, those types of things that have really reduced our attrition rate. The cyber talent management system, I really believe once we get this in place, it will really just be a complete revolution in how you think about public service and civil service, and we're really excited to get that on board. And I'm working with the Suzette Kent, the federal CIO, to think about how do we ensure that all civilian agencies have the ability to recruit and retain quality talent, and so that's also a big initiative. You'll see some of that in the National Cyber Strategy as well, thinking about that workforce of the future.
It's certainly an area where the private sector, they can make significantly more money, and they are truly public servants in doing the work that they are. My question gets specifically to the National Guard. I know the Army Guard and the Air Guard have established cyber units to support U.S. Cyber Command. In what cases can these units support their home states under state authority or other states on a state-to-state basis? And General, that may be best for you. How do you expect? Okay, that's fine. Perfect. Thank you.
So as recently as the elections, we had a number of circumstances where State National Guard were supporting the state elections process with their cyber expertise and skills. As I noted in my statement, we are looking at the orientation and structuring of National Guard support to the civil side of the equation, and that would be with federal assistance in terms of a mission force capability. But I think, as you know, the National Guard, we go with the total force construct in the Department of Defense, which means that you want to have maximum flexibility to utilize all of your force structure to hit your priorities. And if you're segmenting significant chunks of it for particular missions, for particular supported elements, you might lose that. So we're balancing in the assessment what the gain loss is associated with dedicating certain elements of the Guard to cyber domestic missions versus having them in reserve for military missions. So that's a work in progress.
All I would say just on the end is this is really where the come together with DHS, because we have to have that whole of government approach before we throw too many National Guard members. DHS may be having support teams in there, so that's going to be part of the calculus in covering down on all of our bets to a cyber incident. So those are some of the conversations. Last part, we're learning a lot as it goes forward with, just in one scenario, Mr. Rapuano had to sign a waiver to a policy to allow National Guardmen to get TSSCI information when, because they were in Guard status, they were limited to secret. So once again, we're learning a lot as we go through.
It's certainly a different type of mission, but I think that as time goes on, we're going to need to pull on the Guard just for the manpower that it's going to take to handle this mission. But thank you for what you do, and ma'am, I yield the 15 seconds.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you. I want to thanks for coming out. I want to build on what Mr. Scott said. Mr. Rapuano, so in your testimony, you say that you're responsible for leading this with the DHS. So, are you the leader on this, looking at 1653? Are we calling you when there's a question?
Well, we work with the Joint Staff, and we work with.
Yeah, but you're doing the evaluation.
Yes, yes.
Your name will be on
OSD policy is
OSD policy is. So you're okay. Good. Then do you have a timeline for the evaluation?
I don't. I can come back with you to you with the timeline.
You don't yet have an estimate of when you're going to get back to us?
February.
February.
Hot off the presses.
As part of the budget or separately?
Separately.
Separately. Thank you. And you mentioned a few criteria. Have you outlined the top criteria that you will use to evaluate the pilot program?
Well, it's really a trade space analysis, looking at the various missions and capabilities, looking at the contingency planning, looking at the global synchronization prioritization process that the Joint Staff runs to best understand what the best return on investment is in terms of military capability invested against a certain range of problems and contingencies.
So it sounds like a pretty broad, fairly broad answer then still.
Well, the study has, I have not plugged into the study in the last several weeks, so it's advanced beyond the last element of information I have from it.
Okay. So I think there are 3 states, including my state, that are in the pilot, if I'm not mistaken. Washington, I'm sorry, I'm not mistaking that my state is Washington. Washington, Ohio, and Hawaii, I think, are the states. Are you looking at different models for the CSTs, or are they all using the same model?
I don't have that level of detail.
Thanks. And you're looking at costs, obviously, federal portion versus state portion?
Costing is part of the assessment.
Cost is
yes.
part of the assessment. And then as part of the assessment, are you embedded with the CSTs, with the pilot projects in each state, or are you providing them an evaluation tool? They're getting back to you on that.
I don't have that level of detail. I can come back to you with more of the framing in terms of how the study's being worked.
Could you do that, please?
Yes.
Yeah, it's essentially the gist of my questions, and if either General or Ms. Manfra have any comments with regards to the questions I have, that's fine. Great. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Mr. Heiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Manfra, let me begin with you. The cybersecurity strategy places some emphasis on the issue of supply chain risks, and that, of course, is a big concern to many of us, particularly in recent weeks, as there have been some reports of at least possible compromise in some microelectronics. So I'm curious what y'all are doing, what you plan to do in this regard, specifically with federal networks, but also with other stakeholders, national as well as global.
Thank you for the question, sir. We are addressing both the civilian network challenge as well as the national and frankly global issue. On the federal side, what I mentioned is both working, started with things like requiring the removal of Kaspersky last year, when we directed that all agencies had to remove Kaspersky branded products. And what we have been doing since then is working with the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, GSA, OMB, and working through what are the barriers to civilian agencies being able to best manage third-party risk. It's a fairly monumental problem, and it does require thinking about things like procurement, and which is challenging, but we're taking it on, and we're doing it with all agencies at the table. On in this complementary effort, one of the other National Risk Management Center initiatives is actually about supply chain specifically. So we have an entire initiative. We've stood up a supply chain task force with our partners in the IT and the communications industry, every major player that has a role in delivering technology both to the government and to the broader citizenry in our country and frankly globally. And we're working through both to get their perspective on what the federal government could be doing better, but also how can we make the ecosystem more secure so we're not so dependent on technology that is developed and delivered from countries that we are not okay with the laws that they have in place. It's a very challenging problem, but I think we have the right mechanisms in place.
So you're pleased with the direction things are going?
I am absolutely pleased. I always wish that you could revise procurement policy a little bit faster, but it's a process that we have to go through.
Mr. Rapuano, would you like to respond to that as well?
Just very quickly, we are very focused on the vulnerabilities with regard to supply chain. We have concerns about the DODIN, the DoD information system, defense critical assets in terms of looking very closely at potential vulnerabilities in the supply chain, and the defense industrial base in terms of the contract relationships, what are the requirements, how do we reduce the risk associated with contaminated supply, essentially.
Are you likewise satisfied with the direction we're going to have an appropriate defense?
We have a lot of time and effort focused on it right now. It's a big challenge, isn't it?
It is. Okay. Madam Chair, I see the clock says I'm expired. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't
You have
know where
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Actually, it resets, so I'll give you 30 more seconds, Jody.
Okay. Well, the 30 more seconds isn't going to give me time to go into another question. But, General, let me just ask you your perspective on the supply chain issue.
Sir, as said, this is a huge problem, and the bottom line is this is where the info sharing is so powerful, and we need to make sure that we get it rapidly to all the affected players, and that is one of the strengths of this exercise we're going through right now, because in the past, on our side, we weren't always able to share it as well as we are right now. So, yes, it's a much better future, but we got a lot of work to do, sir.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And again, thank you for the work that each of you are doing. Obviously, this is an issue that impacts every agency and every department across the board. And at the heart of it is the defense and national security issues. So thank you for what you're doing in that regard. And thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Heiss. Sorry about the time, but glad you got your questions in. Ms. Jackson-Lee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you to the chair and multiple chairs and multiple ranking members. Thank you to the panel that has made this presentation for us. I am not eager to engage in hyperbole, but I do think that a potential cyber attack is something that we all should be concerned about as much as it would be pervasive enough to cross all of the elements of which we'd be concerned, whether it deals with the question of war and peace, whether it is a domestic internal action, or whether or not it happens to impact the nation's electric grid, water and sewage, the normal functions, transportation. It is amazing reach that we have that I think this hearing is extremely important. And I do think it's important to raise the question regarding the creation of the cyber defense and to start off with my first question, which I think has been asked, but I'd like to hear how effective the collaboration is with the cyber responsibilities of DHS and those of DOD. So we have DHS, we have DOD, and if you can just take a quick moment, do you think it's fully integrated, it's parallel, it's that the distinctive duties are clear, the commands are clear, the working relationships could be better or they're growing? I'd be interested in that, and secretaries, and then to our Lieutenant Colonel.
Ma'am, thank you for the question. From my perspective, I think we have come a very, very long way. And while there is absolutely room to continue to grow, I'm very confident that we're on the right path. As I briefly mentioned before, our approach is really about bringing the policy personnel, the legal teams, and the operators in the room together and thinking about what is it we need to accomplish our missions, and how can we use our complementary authorities and capabilities to best do that? And I think that's the right approach. We've already realized a great deal, whether that's on elections or in other spaces. There's definitely room to continue to integrate our teams, and we're setting the stage to make that happen. But I think we've demonstrated that this can work in real world scenarios. And I'm very satisfied with the track that we're on.
Thank you.
I would agree with every point that Secretary Manfra made. We are looking at and moving out on integrating the policies, plans, and the implementation at the operational level. As noted throughout this testimony, there are a lot of challenges in this space. There are a lot of cross-cutting equities within the government and between the government and the private sector. That's what we're focusing on and prioritizing amongst them, and then really focusing our efforts at the highest priorities.
General?
Yes, ma'am. I would just follow up with the good thing about what we're going through right now is it's not theoretical. We're actually going through real world scenarios, and we're seeing results not just at the operational but at the tactical level. Whenever you see a Kaspersky or election manipulation, et cetera, and we'll talk more about this when we go to the closed door, we're seeing at the lowest levels this information is getting where it needs to be, and we're seeing results of what happens when the information gets there. So we've got more work to do on where we get the relationships so we can be faster, because in the world of cyber, it's all about speed. But I would say we're on a good path right now.
In your next answer, you might mention, you just, when you said speed, I spent a day with Aspen Institute dealing with cybersecurity, and quantum was a very major aspect of it and how fast it is. So let me ask this question very quickly, if the chair would indulge me. First of all, I introduced H.R. 3202, the Cyber Vulnerability Disclosure Reporting Act, and it passed the House, and it is to create a safe place for the private sector to feel safe enough or secure enough to submit to the government its vulnerabilities, since we know they have 85% or more of our cyber in the hands of the private sector. So I appreciate, as I ask this question, that you would incorporate the concept of zero-day possibilities, but working with the private sector. But specifically, I want to ask about the WannaCry and NotPetya attacks as examples of disruptive cyber events that may have or that had far-reaching implications. The impact of these type attacks were felt most acutely abroad, with much of the U.S. cyber infrastructure not seeing the full effect of these attacks. But can you give example of some of the far-reaching consequences for the WannaCry and NotPetya to the United States, and what are some of the more pressing issues regarding Russia interference in the recent federal election? If you could do that, incorporated with the potential of fast quantum technology and how we should be looking at that in terms of our defense. Secretary?
We'll have to take those answers for the record. The time's expired. We will now move to the closed session in Rayburn 2212 immediately and get through as much of that as possible before they call votes. Thank you very much to the witnesses.